Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to this first ever episode of my new vidcast, vodcast, whatever you want to call it. Kind of a podcast, but with video. Trying something a little bit different here. It's been a long time since I've been on YouTube and since I've done anything wrestling related on YouTube. So I've been kind of wanting to jump into the whole, vodcast, vidcast, whatever word you want to come up with to call it. It's not a straightforward podcast where it's just audio. I've thought about doing that in the past, but I hate it when people come on YouTube and just post audio only stuff with like a solid picture as the background and just talk for 15-20 minutes, because it's not that I have a problem with it, but it's like my personal opinion has always been, if you want to do a podcast, just do a podcast and put it on iTunes or something like that, or start your own website or something. In my personal opinion, YouTube is not for just audio only stuff, but to each their own, I guess. This is just my little way of being able to still do wrestling videos and not have to worry about the planning every little blessed thing out in advance. Not having to worry about constant editing and spending 2-3 hours editing a video and constantly having to worry about scripting and things like that, and just kind of being able to just sit down and just talk about subjects involving pro wrestling and current goings on in the world of the WWE and professional wrestling in general. So hopefully I don't ramble for too long. Hopefully this isn't a complete disaster. You're more than welcome to jump into the comments and continue the discussion. And I will be happy to jump in there in the comments and talk to you about pretty much anything wrestling related. And let's just get a conversation going and just give my thoughts and opinions on certain things that are going on in the wrestling business right now. The first thing that I wanted to talk about for this particular episode is we recently had the Raw 25, the 25th anniversary of Monday Night Raw. It emanated from two different arenas. They had part of the show at the Manhattan Center in New York, and they had the rest at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. And going into it, my interpretation, and the thing that I had read all over the internet and everything, was that the first hour of the show was going to be at the Manhattan Center, and that was going to be where they were going to do all of the legends and have the legends make the appearances and whatnot. And then the final 2 hours of Raw were going to take place at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. That's what I was led to believe. That's what the general consensus seemed to be going into the show. And then when the show actually happened, me, along with I think pretty much 99% of the rest of the wrestling world and the rest of wrestling fandom, were kind of blown away and flabbergasted by the lack of a show that was given to the Manhattan Center. I think the general consensus among wrestling fans seemed to be that Raw 25 as a whole sucked. I personally thought that it sucked. I think it was very underwhelming. They spent so much time and energy building up this show and trying to get people interested in it, and it seemed like they were trying really hard to get old fans who may have stopped watching wrestling in the past. It seemed like they were trying really hard to get at least some of those fans to come back for this 25th anniversary show, and it seemed like they were really going all out to make this a special show, at least going out of their way as much, except for announcing actual matches in advance, because it seemed like they didn't really announce any matches in advance. So that had me a little bit worried going in, but I at least thought we were going to get a solid show in regards to nostalgia, in regards to legends coming back and things like that. But surprisingly and strangely, it was very, very lacking in nostalgia. We had the opening segment at the Barclays Center, which I really didn't understand why this Austin McMahon thing took place at the Barclays Center. I get that you have the bigger audience there and it's a bigger crowd, but they started the show technically at the Manhattan Center with JR and King, and they made you think that the opening segment was gonna be at the Manhattan Center, and they showed like 10-15 seconds of saying, hey, here we are, 25th anniversary of Raw, Manhattan Center, and then they switch right over to the Barclays Center. And then they do the whole Austin McMahon segment, which was fantastic. I loved pretty much everything about this segment. And there you go with the fucking clock, as always. But yeah, this segment it felt really old school to me. As far as Vince was as on point as he's been in a long time. Vince hit all of the right notes. He did a brilliant job of coming out there and playing the face in the beginning towards Shane and Stephanie and towards the fans, and then he did such a perfect job of turning it around and then starting to trash the Brooklyn crowd. It was perfect. It's really amazing to me how Vince is still able to work a crowd and play a heel or a face and even switch both roles flawlessly. And he's able to do it better than 99% of the roster in WWE right now. And it's been that way for a long time, in my opinion, because every time Vince is on television, he pretty much always knocks it out of the park. Once in a while, he'll mess up a line or two, but I think for the most part, Vince always shines, and I think he usually outshines most of the current talent that's there on the show, which is not a good thing. But it makes you wonder, like, if Vince is this good and he seems to know exactly what to do to get himself over as a heel or a face and get over whatever angle they're pushing, but they don't seem to comprehend how to apply that to the current modern superstars. If Vince is able to do this that well, why aren't the modern superstars in the current roster able to knock everything out of the park? Because as much as it is the young guys and their ability, there also has to be good guidance from the people running the show. And I think that's one of WWE's biggest problems, and it's been one of their biggest problems for a long time now, is that there is such little guidance being given to these young guys that they kind of get put in a fish out of water a lot of times, and they kind of just end up drowning in certain situations, especially when it's guys who don't have experience improvising. When you'll put a young guy out there, and the slightest little thing will make them screw up or make them draw a blank or something, and then they look like a deer caught in headlights, and they totally screw up the rest of the segment. We've seen it happen a dozen times, more than a dozen times. So, all in all, it was a fantastic segment, but that was really the only good thing about Raw that night. There was really nothing else. I mean, some people got enjoyment out of Roman Reigns and The Miz for the Intercontinental title, and pretty much the only thing I enjoyed about that was The Miz winning. But the fact that they basically shat on the Manhattan Center crowd the majority of the show just made no sense to me whatsoever. Because, like I said, going into the show, I was led to believe, and I think most people were led to believe, that we were going to get at least half and half. But they got maybe 20-something minutes, maybe like 22, 23 minutes at the most of showtime at the Manhattan Center. And every time we'd have a segment or a match at the Barclays Center, after it was over, I'd be thinking, all right, well, they've got to be switching back to Manhattan Center now. And then the commercial would come, and then the commercial would go, and we'd come back, and then it'd be more at the Barclays Center. And eventually, I follow Twitter while I'm watching Raw, and I just start seeing people retweeting tweets from people who were there at the Manhattan Center who are just saying that, this is bullshit, and the crowd is starting to turn. And eventually you started to see videos coming in of people who were at the Manhattan Center, videos of, the crowd chanting, bullshit, and we want refunds, and it really it made no sense to me whatsoever. And supposedly the word after Raw 25, the word coming out of it was that Triple H was actually in charge of the Manhattan Center portion of the show, and Vince was running the Barclays Center portion of the show. And I think this was according to Jerry Lawler on his podcast, said that they kind of ended up scrambling. Triple H kind of ended up scrambling to try and salvage the show in some way. And they started calling, like, The Miz, they had drive over from the Barclays Center to make an appearance there, and they had Ric Flair make an appearance. Both of these appearances were not on camera, were not part of the show. But at the end of the day, the Manhattan Center got 2 matches, I believe. I think 2 matches, Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt, which was just as flat as can be. And the other match was, I think it was the Revival versus, who did they face? I think it was Gallows and Anderson, I think. I could be wrong about that. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it was only 2 matches that they got, and I think they got maybe like 2 segments, including that shit Undertaker segment, which just, I don't understand what that was at all. That served no purpose to me whatsoever. Maybe somebody can explain to me what value that segment had and what the reasoning behind that was, because I can't seem to figure it out. I really have no clue what they were going for with that. After all this time, with all the speculation of The Undertaker being retired and him having his last match against Reigns at last year's WrestleMania, he hasn't been seen since WrestleMania 33. And for this to be his first appearance where it's just another run-of-the-mill generic Undertaker promo just left everybody, I think everybody was scratching their heads after it, just wondering, well, what the fuck was the point of that? What purpose did that serve? Really the only noteworthy thing to me, anyway, it was kind of the first thing that I noticed when Undertaker came out was that he wasn't wearing his gloves. And as I think most people know who saw WrestleMania, one of the things he did during his kind of goodbye, farewell kind of thing he did after the match at Mania was he left his gloves in the ring as well as his hat and the trench coat. So I really don't know what their plan is. The rumor right now is that it's going to be Undertaker and Cena at WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans. Personally, I could care less about that match. I think it's way too late for that. The ship has sailed and it's been lost out at sea for a decade now. Both guys at this point are too old, in my opinion. That's not to say that Cena can't still deliver an awesome match, because he can, but Undertaker is just he's way past the point of being able to put on a top quality match, especially with another guy who's been around for as long as Cena has. If The Undertaker couldn't have a spectacular match with Roman Reigns, who is, the future of the company, how can you expect him to have a fantastic match with a guy like John Cena, who, even though he's been able to put on great matches, most of the great matches Cena is able to put on now are with the younger talent. And he always gets fed guys that he's able to work really well with and he's able to connect with really well. And he has great chemistry with a lot of these young guys like AJ Styles and Finn Balor. I think it's way too late for it, especially considering the farewell they did with Taker last year. I think it's way past the point, and Taker just needs to let it die and just let it go. It was a sad and emotional moment at the end of Mania last year. I don't want to have that be forced again, where we're forcing another farewell, and then nobody's going to buy into the fact that he's really done whenever he actually is done. So, I'll get into that subject on another time when we get closer to WrestleMania, and once we see what the actual plan is for Mania and for Undertaker, if there is one. But yeah, overall, Raw 25, in my opinion, was just a disaster. It did not live up to the expectations at all. And I think that, luckily we have 5 years from now, the 30th anniversary. Hopefully they don't completely screw that up. Hopefully they actually learn something from this and actually get their shit together for the 30th anniversary, because you can't have one segment be the only watchable thing on the entire show. That's not, especially for a 25th anniversary edition. It's just, you can't do that, and it's just not acceptable to me as a longtime wrestling fan. And I don't think it's acceptable to most fans. nor should it be. So the next subject that I wanted to talk about a bit was the Women's Royal Rumble. We had the first ever Women's Royal Rumble this year, and overall the Royal Rumble pay-per-view was pretty damn solid. We finally got, after all these years, they finally gave us a satisfying Royal Rumble pay-per-view. It took them long enough to get it right. We had Shinsuke Nakamura win the Men's Royal Rumble match, and that match was put together really well. The Final Four, that whole sequence with him and Reigns and Cena and Finn Balor was phenomenal. It was crafted perfectly, and the story was told really well, and it was one of the few times in years that I was actually on the edge of my seat wondering who was going to win, and I was really it gave me a reason to root, actually, genuinely root for Shinsuke Nakamura to win. And they told that story perfectly, and Shinsuke Nakamura winning was amazing. I can't wait for Nakamura and AJ at Mania. It's going to be a phenomenal match, pun intended. So I can't wait for that. But we also had the Women's Royal Rumble match that was very solid as well. It was a good way to kick off a Women's Royal Rumble match type. The problem, though, in my opinion, is I think going forward, they're going to have a big issue with keeping this match interesting and keeping it viable and having it serve a purpose going forward. Because this year was all, fine and dandy. You had all of these legends that you could bring back to have them be in the match, and it made it an interesting match, an entertaining match, but at the end of the day, where do we go from here? We had all the legends come back this year, but we don't have enough of a roster to fill up a Royal Rumble match for the women and make it viable, to make it something that is guaranteed to be a success. And if they're going to start having a Women's Royal Rumble match year after year after year, you're going to have to start building up the women's division and making more stars, because right now you don't have anywhere near as many stars in the women's division as you need to have in order to make a Women's Royal Rumble match, a 30-person Women's Royal Rumble match, serve a purpose. Because you can't keep having the same legends come back over and over again every year. So that's why I really don't get what they're going to do with this. I love the fact that Asuka won. It was overall it was an entertaining match. I enjoyed pretty much the entire thing. But like I said, how many times can you have Tori Wilson, Lita, all of these people come back year after year? I mean, they're getting up there in age. They're not getting any younger. They don't have, they don't get into the ring on a regular basis. So you can't be trying to sell this match based solely on bringing back these same legends every year over and over and over again. Eventually, you've got to be able to have a solid enough women's division where you can have 30 people in it, and people are not going to crap on it or not care about it. And I think they've kind of put themselves in a corner there, because you've got your Sasha Banks, you've got your Baileys, you've got your Charlottes, you've got Becky Lynch, and there's probably maybe 5 to 10 others that make up the women's division and make it as solid as it is. But it's nowhere near enough as far as being solid, in my opinion. It's not solid enough to be able to make a Women's Royal Rumble match every single year a viable option. And in addition to that, I just don't want to see 2 Royal Rumble matches to begin with. I think we already have too much of that as it is. We already have too many gimmick pay-per-views based off of gimmick matches. We have enough TLC. We have enough Hell in a Cell. We have enough, of all these other gimmick matches that we see, multiple of these match types per every year. We don't need 2 Royal Rumble matches now. 2 Hell in a Cell matches is already too many. 2 Money in the Bank ladder matches is too many. It gets to the point where do you draw the line? And now we've got 2 Elimination Chamber matches that we've got coming up at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. It's like, it feels like, to me, and you guys can leave a comment and let me know if you agree with this. It seems to me like they're forcing it at this point. Like they're forcing the first, the women's firsts. We had the first ever Women's Royal Rumble, and now the next pay-per-view, we've got the first ever Women's Elimination Chamber. Eventually, we're going to have a million other firsts. We've already had the first ever Women's Hell in a Cell match. It seems like they're trying to force this too quickly, because I don't have a problem. Let me make it clear. I don't have an issue at all with the women having their own Hell in a Cell matches and TLC matches and all that stuff. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think it's, way past due. But there is a downside in doing it too quickly, trying to do too much too quickly, because people see through it, and it comes across as just a blatant attempt at good PR. It comes across as a publicity stunt, and just trying to capitalize on the times that we live in and the state of the world right now. But like I said, I don't have a problem with a Women's Royal Rumble match. It's just, if you're going to do it every year, it needs to generate as much interest as the Men's Royal Rumble match does. And I think the way you start off doing that, getting to that point, you need more stars in the women's division. And you can't just fill all of those spots with NXT people, with these rookies who hardly have any ring experience. A lot of them hardly have any ring experience to begin with, let alone experience in a battle royal type match, an over-the-top rope battle royal type environment. You can't just start throwing out all these no-names into this match just to fill up these spots and so you can have 30 entrants. So leave a comment and let me know your thoughts on that, because I really don't know how they're going to go about doing this and making it a viable option, because I don't have faith when it comes to them thinking this type of thing through. I feel like they just force it as quickly as possible just to get the PR, and then they kind of find themselves in a corner going forward, because the last thing I want is to have another Women's Royal Rumble match that nobody cares about and to have the fans turn on it because they have nothing but no names in there that nobody cares about, and you have people who are as green as grass who end up stinking up the match. That's the last thing I want. So leave a comment and let me know what your thoughts and your opinions on that particular subject are. And that leads me to another thing that I wanted to discuss in this video, which was the prospect that came up recently with the relaunch of the XFL, which I thought was very surprising. Didn't expect them to do that. But at the same time, now that they've announced it, I do think that now is a better time than any to relaunch the XFL, just because I think that now more than ever, I think there are more people now than ever before that are looking for and would accept an alternative to the NFL. Whether or not it'll be a success, I don't know. That remains to be seen. But I think you do have benefit with the XFL name still being attached to it, because that's already going to garner media attention, as it already has, and that's been it's already been proven that every sports media outlet has been talking about this XFL relaunch. So I think they've already got that going for them. Plus the fact that you've had enough controversies with the NFL, with ratings and with the national anthem stuff and all that other stuff that has been generated by people. I think that alone is going to get people more open to the idea of a alternative to the NFL. So that leads me to what I wanted to talk about, which is the prospect of Vince McMahon taking more of a back seat when it comes to the creative side of the product. Because it's come out recently, I think within the past week, that at least as far as 205 Live goes right now, it's come up that Vince McMahon will be taking a back seat to 205 Live, and Triple H will be taking over the creative of 205 Live, which is big. It's a big deal because with the Enzo Amore scandal that's gone on and the way he was railroaded, I think that there is a big opening here to kind of reinvent 205 Live and make it what it should have been from the get-go, which was more along the lines of the Cruiserweight Classic, which was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you really need to go out of your way to watch it because there were some absolutely incredible matches that took place during that tournament. So I think that there is definitely, with Triple H at the helm, I think there's a big chance of them turning 205 Live around and making it into something more special and making it something that works sort of in the same way as NXT, but with the cruiserweights instead of just the regular style of wrestling. But as far as Vince stepping down goes, I think it's a step in the right direction because I think if Triple H is taking over 205 Live and 205 Live fails and it still goes down, I think you could attribute it mostly to the product already being too far damaged, because I think there's, to a certain extent, to a certain degree, a lot of people have already given up on it and are probably not going to give it another chance. But at the same time, at least for somebody like me, if now that I know that Triple H has taken the reins as far as 205 Live, I'm going to start checking it out to see if it turns around anytime soon. And if the in-ring product gets better, and if there's better characters and more, if they put more effort into it. And I think that'll happen with Triple H at the helm. So I think Vince stepping down in regards to 205 Live is a good step in the right direction. And if it's a success, I think there's a higher likelihood after that of Vince taking more of a back seat when it comes to the main product of WWE in regards to Raw and SmackDown Live. So I think that this will be a good test for Triple H to see how he does taking over a product that Vince had his hand in, because NXT was Triple H's baby from the get-go. So this is a situation where Vince was fully in charge of 205 Live from the get-go, but now Triple H will be taking the reins, so we'll have to see if Triple H can kind of do the whole, turn chicken shit into chicken salad. So I think I have high hopes for it. I think Triple H knows the product as far as it relates to modern audiences. I think he knows it better than Vince does, and I think Triple H has a better chance of being successful running 205 Live than Vince had. And Vince has already has been proven. 205 Live has been a failure. The Cruiserweight division as a whole has been a failure with Vince McMahon behind the reins. So it remains to be seen how that whole thing turns out. But I think it's a very good thing with Triple H at the helm, and I think it's a sign that if it does well, we could see more of Triple H and his influence taking more control of the main WWE product, and that I think will be better for everyone, especially us diehard wrestling fans. So with that, that'll do it for this first episode of my my vodcast, vidcast, whatever. Don't have a name for it or anything like that. But like I said, if you have any thoughts or opinions on any of the topics that I covered in this video, leave a comment. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. If you subscribe, if you could do me a favor and hit that little bell that appears next to the subscribe button, because you know how YouTube are a bunch of pieces of garbage. More often than not, a lot of times the people you're subscribed to, their videos won't show up in your subscription feed, so you have to click that bell, and then you'll get a little notification anytime I upload a new episode. And I'm not sure yet also how frequently I'll be doing new episodes. I'm thinking every couple weeks, maybe an episode every 2 weeks, or maybe every 3 weeks, or possibly one a month. I'm not really sure. But I'm really just gonna kind of wing it and just see what happens. And I'm also looking into the possibility of doing some live streaming on here, because I really would love to be able to talk to anybody that watches these videos and just kind of interact, especially if there's any of my audience from the past that has stuck with me through all this time, through thick and thin. I'd really love to be able to talk about what the current goings on in wrestling. So with that, leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate it, especially if you watched all the way through. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. Hopefully this wasn't complete shit. So with that, I am WWE Reckoning 316. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.